ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة خلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, to proceed, the best of speech is the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the best of guidance is the guidance of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The worst of all affairs are those affairs that have newly been added into the religion. Every newly added affair in the religion is an innovation, and every innovation is a misguidance, and every misguidance is in the fire of hell. We ask Allah to save us from innovations, misguidance, and the fire of hell. By the praise of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, we continue tonight with our reading from and commentary upon فوائد مستنبطة من قصة يوسف, benefits derived from the story of Yusuf, by Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasir ibn Sa'di alayhi rahmatullah. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, in chapter 6, ومنها, and from amongst them, يعني the benefits, جواز استعمال الحيل والمكائد التي يتوصل بها إلى حق من الحقوق الواجبة والمستحبة أو الجائزة. The permissibility of using plots and schemes and tricks by which to obtain an obligatory right, something that is rightful, or one that is preferred, or one that is allowed. ما استعمل يوسف ذلك مع أخيه حيث وضع السقاية في رحل أخيه. Just as Yusuf used this regarding the affair of his brother, where he placed the vessel of the king in the belongings of his brother. ثم أذن مؤذن بعد رحيلهم أيتها العير إنكم لسارقون. And then a caller called out in a loud voice after they departed, O caravan, O travelers, caravan of travelers, indeed you have stolen, you are thieves. All the way up to the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, فَبَدَأَ بِأَوْعِيَتِهِمْ قَبْلَ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَخْرَجَهَا مِنْ وِعَاءِ أَخِيهِ كَذَلِكَ كِدْنَا لِيُوسُفَ مَا كَانَ لِيَأْخُذَ أَخَاهُ فِي دِينِ الْمَلِكِ. All the way up to the statement of Allah, He began with their vessels or their belongings, searching them, meaning before He searched the belongings of His brother, and then He extracted it from the belongings of His brother. As such, we plotted for Yusuf. He would not have taken his brother he would not have had the right to take his brother in the religion of the king. This shows us how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has plotted for Yusuf. Because Yusuf did not have any means by which to take his brother. And this is not the punishment normally for theft, that he would be able to take his brother. However, as we will see, as the Shaykh keeps explaining, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plotted for Yusuf. Allah aided him and put success in his plans, such that what he devised successfully led to extracting his brother from them. فعمل مع أخيه هذا العمل ليتوصل به إلى بقائه عنده. So he did this with his brother in order to achieve keeping his brother with him, من غير شعور منهم, without any of them noticing. فلما تقرر عندهم أنه هو الذي أخذ الصواع استفتاهم عن حكم السارق في دينهم. Once it became established to them that their brother is the one that took the vessel of the king, استفتاهم, he asked them what is the punishment of the thief in their religion. Now it appears here that there is a mix-up, because the question was actually posed to them before the search began. He asked them, what is the punishment if we find that there is a thief amongst you? So that's when they said, من وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه. Then whoever the vessel is found in his belongings, he is his own recompense, meaning he shall enter into slavery and he shall be given as a slave, as a punishment for the crime that he has committed. فقالوا جزاؤه من وجد في رحله فهو جزاؤه كذلك نجزي الظالمين. We already translated the first part. The second part is, as such we punish the transgressors. This is part of their religion. This is part of their practice. جزاء السارق أن يتملكه المسروق منه. Shaykh explains, he says, meaning the punishment of the thief is that he becomes a property, he becomes owned by, becomes the slave of the person he stole from. فحكموا على أنفسهم هذا الحكم. So they ruled upon against their own selves. الذي هو المقصود ليوسف. This particular ruling, which was the objective of Yusuf all along. ولو أجرى عليه حكم ملك مصر لكان له حكم آخر. And if Yusuf had exacted upon them the rulings that are practiced by the king of Egypt, it would have been a different punishment. ويسر الله هذا العمل وهذا الحكم ليبقى أخوه عنده. So Allah made easy this particular device, this particular plot, and this particular ruling in order for his brother to remain with him. فالحيل التي على هذا النوع لا حرج فيها. So tricks and plots of this type, there is no sin in them. وإنما المحرم الحيل والمكائد التي يتوصل بها إلى إحلال المحرمات أو إسقاط الواجبات. And the only thing that is forbidden out of plots and schemes and tricks is those by which a person achieves reaching something that is haram, making it halal, or getting out of an obligation by way of these tricks and deceptions. So here the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, is establishing a concept that if Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, and he's one of the great prophets of Allah, he used this trick, this ploy to extract his brother suddenly without any of them knowing what he was up to, then this shows the permissibility of such devices. But the Shaykh is giving us a caveat. He's teaching us what the conditions are. This is not allowed without exception. Rather, this is allowed in similar circumstances. When there is a right that is being usurped, when there is something rightful that must be extracted, and there is no clear and direct path by which to extract that right and obtain it. And then, and only then, may you go the back way and extract it by using these types of ploys and tricks. Notice that no sin was committed throughout. Although he used a trick, he alayhi salatu wasalam did not commit or encourage the committing of any sin throughout this whole process. The Shaykh is going to elaborate further. ومنها استعمال المعاريض عند الحاجة. And from amongst the benefits is using المعاريض عند الحاجة. المعاريض is a plural word that refers to ambiguous speech. Specifically, speech that seems to indicate to the listener one particular meaning, whilst this person speaking intends a different meaning. This is called, or these are called al-ma'arid. So in essence, they are not strictly lying, but they do deceive the person listening into thinking something other than what is intended. So the intention of the person using al-ma'arid is to mislead the listener, to make them think about something else versus what he's actually talking about. And this is done intentionally. The benefit of al-ma'arid, and this is why the Shaykh is making a point of this, the benefit of al-ma'arid is that they save you from outright lying. They save you from outright lying. And the Shaykh is making it clear that al-ma'arid are only used when there is a need, when there is a need, not to be used all the time. There's a story that is mentioned by the people of knowledge, how one of the great scholars of Islam, Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala, had to use al-ma'arid one time. A man came to him and he sought refuge. He asked Imam Ahmad to give him shelter in his home and explained to him, or it was known, that he was being chased by some oppressive people. In other words, if they got their hands on him, they would wrongfully torture him, punish him, perhaps even kill him. So Imam Ahmad gave him shelter. He allowed the man into his home. Lo and behold, the search party arrived at Al Imam's house and they came knocking. And they asked Imam Ahmad if so and so was here. And Imam Ahmad did this. For those of you who are watching the video, you can see what I'm doing with my hand. And he said, Laysa huna, he is not here. For those of you who cannot see my hand, perhaps you're listening to the audio, he pointed with his right hand at the palm of his left hand, and he said, he's not here. He's not here. The intent of Imam Ahmad is, he's not in my palm. For those of them who were listening to Imam Ahmad speak, and they were not paying attention to the gestures of his hand, they understood that he's not in my home. And so they departed, and the man was saved by the permission of Allah, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is an example of something like this being a necessity, where if you hand this man over, they're going to potentially torture him or kill him. So using al-ma'arid, avoiding a lie, not having to speak an outright lie, and at the same time saving a life, this is something that is praiseworthy. There's nothing wrong with it. This is what the Shaykh is establishing here. فإن في المعاريض مندوحة عن الكذب. Indeed, al-ma'arid give you a way, an exit out of having to lie. وذلك من وجوه. This was established in a number of ways. يعني in the story of Yusuf. منها قوله ثم استخرجها من وعاء أخيه. And then he extracted it from the belongings of his brother. ولم يقل سرقها. And he did not say stole it. كذلك قوله معاذ الله أن نأخذ إلا من وجدنا متاعنا عنده. The refuge of Allah is sought. Likewise, the statement of Yusuf, the refuge of Allah is sought, that we would take anyone besides the one that we found our belongings with. Again, Yusuf did not use the word theft. This is when his brothers offered that one of them should be taken instead of the one that Yusuf took. Obviously, they don't know that Yusuf took that particular one because that's the one he wants. And they did not know that Yusuf is the one that had the vessel placed in his belongings in order to achieve this particular outcome. So they offered Yusuf to take another one. If you just want a slave, take a slave. Someone is going to serve you, someone that you can sell in the slave market, whatever your purpose may be, take one of us. Why? إِنَّ لَهُ أَبًا شَيْخًا كَبِيرًا. He has a father that is a sheikh, and not just a sheikh, shaykhan kabira. What does the word sheikh mean in this context? Any of you know? For those of you who know, share it with us in the chat for the benefit of the brothers and the sisters. Word sheikh today in the common usage of today's people is not the same as how it used to be used back in the days. The word sheikh in the language, the Arabic language, means someone who clearly has aged, who is showing the signs of aging. Some of the linguists, some of the grammarians, they are even more specific. They say he must have reached the age of 50. He must have reached the age of 50. Some of them differ, and they said 51. In other words, if you're not 50 or 51, you cannot be called a sheikh. This is one point. And when we say 50 or 51, which calendar are we talking about? Is it the lunar calendar or is it the Gregorian calendar? The lunar calendar. Because whether we're talking about the religions of old or we're talking about the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of these religions were based around a lunar calendar. Allah Jalla wa Ala said in the Quran, إِنَّ عِدَّةَ الشُّهُورِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض. Indeed, the number of months with Allah are 12 months on the day that He created the heavens and the earth. Yani this is from the very beginning, from the outset, that Allah made them 12 months. And then Allah said, Minha arba'atun hurum. 4 of them are sacred. From among them are 4 sacred ones. In other words, these months that we today call the Hijri calendar are the same month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognized, clarified, and taught His slaves from the very beginning of creation. So all the calendars that we're talking about, whether they are before the Hijri calendar, they are the calendars of prophets of old, or the calendar of the Muslimin, we are always referring to a lunar calendar. Today we call it the Hijri calendar because it is based on the Hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With that being said, if you are 50 on the Gregorian calendar, then for sure you're going to be 50 on the Hijri calendar. But if you're 49, perhaps even 48 on the Gregorian calendar, you may have already reached 50 in the Hijri calendar, and then you can be called Sheikh. And if it's a sister, you can be called Sheikha. Both are correct. Sheikhun wa Sheikha. Both are linguistically correct from the proper Arabic. Now, some of the scholars also say, they mention this, that a sheikh begins at 50 and ends at 80, and then they have another word for 80 and beyond. This is one opinion. The other opinion is 50 all the way to no end. It is open-ended. 50 and beyond, 50 and older. This is a sheikh. In today's language, this word is mostly used for people of knowledge. In reality, this is not the usage of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. As you can see, it is also not the usage of the Quran. In the Quran, the word Shaykh is mentioned at least 3 times. In Surah Yusuf is one example. In the description of Ibrahim by his own wife, وَهَذَا بَعْلِي شَيْخًا, and the description of the 2 women that spoke to Musa alayhi salatu wassalam in Surah Al-Qasas. They said, وَأَبُونَا شَيْخٌ كَبِيرٌ. Now that you understand what Shaykh means, let me pose this question to you. Why did they use the word Kabir? Surah Yusuf. إِنَّ لَهُ أَبًا شَيْخًا كَبِيرًا. Why do you have to mention Kabir after the word Shaykh? It appears to me, Allahu A'lam, that the word Kabir is added to eliminate all of these are good suggestions. It appears that the word kabir is used to eliminate the possibility of understanding that he is 50 or thereabouts. If they said sheikh, and sheikh is understood to be anyone 50 and older, there's not much to feel sorry for. If he's 50 or 53 or 55, that's not a big reason to feel sorry for him and work with them regarding their request and take another one and leave this particular one. But when they say shaykhun kabir, yani we are establishing that he's a sheikh, he's in that stage of life, and not just the beginning of that stage of life, 50 and beyond. No, he's an elderly sheikh. In other words, we're talking about 60 something, 70 something, 80 something, Allahu A'lam. So they wanted to make it very clear that if you take this one, his father will suffer. His father will suffer greatly. We'll take another one of us instead. And so Yusuf responded with this tremendous response. Pay attention to what he said. مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ, the refuge of Allah is sought. نَأْخُذَ إِلَّا مَنْ وَجَدْنَا مَتَاعَنَا عِنْدَهُ, that we take anyone besides the one that we found our belongings with. The Shaykh extracted two benefits from this. One of them is what we are discussing right now. Another one is going to come later on in the story, but whilst we're here, let's cover that one as well. First one, what we're talking about here, is that Yusuf did not lie. Again, he avoided lying by speaking the exact truth. He didn't say, the refuge of Allah is sought to take anyone besides the one who stole from us. He knows his brother did not steal. So if he said the one who stole from us, then that would be a lie. Instead, he said the facts. What are the facts? We found our belongings with him in his luggage, in his container. And this shows you that the prophets, the messengers, avoid lying at all costs. If at all possible, prophets and the messengers of Allah avoid lying. And if they are stuck and they are in a situation where there is no way to reveal the entire truth, they will always use al-ma'arid, even if it's something as dangerous as life and death, saving someone from great harm and oppression. They would still not outright lie. They would not still resort to outright lying. And instead they will use al-ma'arid. This is a lesson for us. But lying should be the last option on your plate. Lying should not be something that you are willing to consider. It is simply not an option. One of the things that you want to remember when you consider this concept is the statement, as-sidqu manja, lying saves. As-sidqu manja, truth saves. I said the exact opposite of that. So the correct translation is truth saves. Saying the truth and sticking by the truth is a reason to be saved. Is a reason to be saved. There are numerous ahadith, likewise ayat in the Quran, that show how the people of the truth are always saved by Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala for choosing truthfulness. The Shaykh said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ إِنَّ هَذَا اتِّهَامٌ لِلْبَرِيء. Before we actually translate this, let's mention the second benefit that is to be taken from this ayah. And this is also something the Shaykh covers later on. It is that Yusuf continued to play along based upon his plan. Instead of Yusuf dealing with it as if he must observe the rulings of what he knows to be the reality, instead he observed the rulings of what appears to be the reality. Why is this important? Because if you understand what it appears to be, you will understand the rulings of Allah Ta'ala. How does it appear? It appears that the youngest of their brothers, one of their youngest brothers, stole. He stole an item that belongs to the king, Suwa' al-Malik. He placed it in his luggage. He hid it well. They discovered that something was missing. They suspected that they are the thieves. So they called out to them, "You are thieves, you are stealing." They stopped, they searched them, and they found it in their brother's belongings. And so their brother had to be given based upon what? Punishment that they themselves have chosen according to their religion. And that is that he, the thief, becomes a slave to the one that he stole from. This is what is apparent. Based on what is apparent, there are rights that belong to Allah Jalla wa Ala. These rights are explained in this ayah. Yusuf said, the refuge of Allah is sought that we take anyone except the one who we found our belongings with. Let's read the rest of the verse. Inna idhan la zalimun. And if we were not to do this, then we would be transgressors. Yusuf here is clarifying the right of Allah Azza wa Jal regarding a story that appears to be this. That is, that no one should be punished for the crime of another. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. No one carries the burden of another. You cannot punish someone for a crime committed by their relative. You cannot punish someone for a crime committed by someone they know. You cannot punish someone for a crime that they had no role to play in, that they did not support, they did not condone, they had nothing to do with. The religion of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala does not allow for this. Inna idhan la zalimun, otherwise we would be transgressors. This is the deen of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. This is the justice found in the deen of Al-Islam. The author said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ إِنْ هَذَا اتِّهَامٌ لِلْبَرِيء. And if it is said that this is an accusation to an innocent man, the answer can simply be قِيلَ إِنَّمَا فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ بِإِذْنِ أَخِيهِ وَرِضَاهُ وَإِذَا رَضِيَ زَالَ الْمَحْذُورُ. The answer can be that he did this with his brother's permission and his brother's acceptance. And if his brother is okay with this, then there is no harm. ومنها, and from the benefits. أن الإنسان لا يحل له أن يشهد إلا بما يعلم لقولهم وما شهدنا إلا بما علمنا. That a person may not bear witness, testify to anything except that he has knowledge of it. In other words, testimony cannot be based upon guesswork. Testimony cannot be based upon hearsay. Testimony can only be based upon facts. What you know for a fact. Something you've heard, something you've seen, something you've touched, something you've smelt. Something that relates back to the five senses. Not intuition, not guessing, not analysis. This is not testimony. This is not shahada. Shahada is based upon knowledge. And when did they say this? The brothers of Yusuf said, وَمَا شَهِدْنَا إِلَّا بِمَا عَلِمْنَا, when they were defending themselves on returning to their father with yet another missing son. Then the author, he explains what could constitute knowledge in this case. He said, وَإِنَّ الْعِلْمَ يَحْصُلُ بِإِقْرَارِ الْإِنسَانِ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. Knowledge happens by way of a person confessing to committing a crime, confessing basically against himself. وَبِوُجُودِ الْمَسْرُوقِ وَنَحْوِهِ مَعَهُ وَفِي يَدِهِ أَوْ رَحْلِهِ. And finding the stolen item with him, or in his hand, or in his belongings, and the like of it. وفيها, and from the benefits of this story, أن وجود المسروق بيد السارق بينة وقرينة على أنه السارق. That finding the stolen item in the hand of the thief is a clear proof, is an indicator, is anecdotal evidence that he is the thief. For this reason, Yusuf ruled, and they also ruled, that the brother of Yusuf deserved particular punishment that they had chosen for the thief. In other words, they did not say, we need CCTV camera footage. We need an eyewitness. We need two people to swear an oath and say they saw him steal it and put it in his luggage. Instead, they sufficed with what appears to be enough evidence, and that is that it was found in his luggage. It is assumed that he took it and placed it in his luggage. This is anecdotal evidence. And this kind of evidence is enough in a court of law to establish the rulings. This kind of evidence is enough in a court of law to establish the rulings. And without the admission of this kind of evidence in a court of law, what would happen is that many rights would be usurped because there is no certain proof. There is no certain proof, and the only kind of proof available in many cases is this kind of proof, anecdotal evidence. This would allow many a criminal to get away with a crime that they have committed and cause great harm to innocent people. And I will give you another example of how the prophets and the messengers of Allah, they use this kind of anecdotal evidence. Take, for example, the story of the two women in the time of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhim as-salatu was-salam that were out in the wilderness having their sheep graze. The wolf came and stole one of their children. Each of these two women had a child with her, and the wolf came and stole one of their children. When this happened, the mother of the stolen child, who just lost her child, said to the woman whose child was still there, "This is my child. The one that is still here is my child." She falsely claimed that the child that is still there is her child. Now, immediately, there's something that you and I can perhaps agree on. There is a motive. What is the motive? Why would she say that to the woman that is still safe and tranquil? Her child is there and has not been harmed. What would be the motive to say that to the woman? You just lost your child. Why would you say to your companion, "The wolf took your child, not mine. This child that you see there, that's mine"? What would be the motive? Any of you who know the answer, share it with us. If you would like me to repeat the question, I don't mind. I can explain it further. Two women were out grazing. Each of them had her baby with her. The wolf came and stole one of the two children. One mother was bereaved, lost her child. The other one was relieved, her child is safe. The bereaved mother, who lost her child, all of a sudden turns to the other one and says, "The wolf took your child, not mine." And she begins claiming, falsely, that the child that is safe, unharmed by the wolf, is her child. The other one is looking at her, incredulous. Why in the world do you claim that my child is yours, while the wolf clearly took your child? You know you're not confused. You know you can recognize whose child is who, is which. So my question to you, as we both ponder this hadith, this narration of Rasulullah ﷺ, telling us about what happened in the time of Dawood and Sulaiman, alayhim as-salatu was-salam. My question to you, before we proceed, what is her motive? Why is she doing that? What is her reason? What is egging her on to make this false claim? This is very important to understand the rest of the story. Okay? These are good suggestions. The answer appears to be, and Allah knows best, jealousy. Pure and simple envy. Nothing else. Pure and simple envy. And this will help you understand the story as we keep telling it. The women kept on arguing and eventually had to end up in court. So they stood before the Prophet of Allah, the Prophet Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam. They told their story, each of them claiming that the wolf took the other's child, that the remaining child is her child. Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam, in the absence of any evidence, he exercised his best judgment and ruled that the older of the two women is the mother. He ruled that the older of the two women is the mother. When they left the court of Dawood, Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, he asked them, so they told him what the ruling was. And when he saw what the case was built upon, and he realized that there is a way to extract some evidence, he said to them, bring me the knife, bring me the knife. Or rather, he said in front of them to his staff, if that's the correct word to use, bring me the knife. I'm going to cut him in half and let each of them take a half. In other words, he's feigning, he's pretending, he's faking like he's going to exact justice. There's no proof. You don't have proof. She doesn't have proof. You have absolutely nothing to present to the court making a claim. I don't see why the older one should take him. I don't see why the younger one should take him. But I see that fairness is each of you take a half. That's fairness. Obviously, these women, they don't know better. They don't know that a prophet and a messenger, the caliber of Sulaiman ibn Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam, would never kill an innocent child. So they both immediately assumed that this is exactly what's about to happen. And this creates evidence. Because now we have a jealous woman and we have a real mother. Their reactions are going to be diametrically opposite to each other. Exactly the opposite, the antidote, the opposite reactions. One is going to potentially look satisfied. He's jealous. He's full of hatred. And the other one is going to seem afraid and anxious and worried because she's a real mother. She would rather her child live instead of be killed, even if he lives with another woman. Even he's taken rightfully by a woman that stole him from her, basically in broad daylight. So what happens next? The younger woman says to Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam, he is her child. May Allah have mercy on you. He confesses to a crime she never committed. She confesses to a crime she never committed. She says, I was lying, basically. He is her child. May Allah have mercy on you. May Allah have mercy on you, meaning what? Meaning I'm begging you, have mercy on him, don't kill him. He is her child. And if you have mercy on him, may Allah have mercy on you. This is now evidence. He extracted what is in the hearts of these women. It's anecdotal evidence. It's anecdotal evidence. But it is sufficient to lean in one direction. So Sulaiman reversed the ruling of his father Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam and gave the child to the younger woman. This is an example of the prophets and messengers of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala using anecdotal evidence. It is not concrete evidence, but it is sufficient to be used in a court of law. And the more a judge understands the rulings of Islam, understands the revelation of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, both the Quran and the Sunnah, the more able he is to extract these kinds of rulings. Someone may say, well, this is a very old example. Can you give us something more recent? Yes, there's an example of something more recent. A judge in Saudi Arabia, very recent, we're talking about within the last maybe 30, 40 years, was presented with a case where a man was claiming that he has the title, the deed to a piece of land, that so-and-so from the major scholars of Islam had signed on that title. He had his name signed on the bottom. That particular judge, he had on staff, and additionally, outside of his staff, he had access to the major students of that scholar whose signature was found on the deed to that land. So when the deed was examined, it seemed to be okay. Signature was examined, it seemed to be okay. He showed it to the students who would obviously recognize their teacher's signature because he was a judge and they used to work in his court, and they would recognize his signature because it was seen in many a document. And they all said, both the ones on his staff in the court and the ones outside of court that he showed the signature to, all of them said, this is the signature of Shaykh so-and-so. Now I'm going to tell you something, and this is an amazing fact. This particular scholar, this particular judge, who was investigating this case, in charge of this case, was blind. He was blind. He had no vision in his eyes, but Allah Azza wa Jal gave him vision of heart. Such is the case when a man is filled with the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. حسبهم كذلك والله حسيبهم. So he said, okay, I'm going to deliberate on this. And then he had the man summoned to court, the man who claims that this land is his and he has the title and deed to it. He said to the man, we have discovered that your document is forged. We have come to find out that your document is forged. And now we're making you an offer. Either you will tell us the exact details of how you came upon this document, or I'm going to punish you. In other words, he gave him an offer. If you confess, I'm not going to punish you. If you don't confess, you're going to be punished. Not just for making a false claim to the court, but also for not confessing. So the man immediately, as the saying goes, spilled the beans. He immediately told the truth. He said, I've been studying the signature of the Shaykh. I think he mentioned 2 years and attempting to replicate it until I perfected it. And then I signed on the document the name of the Shaykh. This is how I obtained this document. I forged it with my own hands. So here, this is amazing enough. What is even more amazing is the logic behind the discovery. Students of the Shaykh, who recognized that this is his signature, were all surprised. Why did he not accept their word that this is the signature of the Shaykh? Furthermore, how was he able to realize that this was a forgery whilst he's not as familiar as they are with the signature? Furthermore, he's a blind man. They said to the Shaykh, how did you discover this? How did you find out? What led you to this discovery? He said, because it is signed by Shaykh so and so. Said, and the Shaykh would never describe himself as a Shaykh. This one word, the word Shaykh, was enough reason for him to have so much doubt about this that he eventually decided that this cannot be the signature of the Shaykh so and so, because the Shuyukh do not view themselves as Shuyukh. They view themselves as little, as puny. So he continued investigating until the truth came out. And this was the anecdotal evidence that he relied upon. Moving on from this point. ومنها, and from the benefits of the story, هذه المحنة العظيمة التي امتحن الله بها نبيه وصفيه يعقوب عليه الصلاة والسلام حيث قضى بالفراق بينه وبين يوسف هذه المدة الطويلة. The benefits of this story is this tremendous trial Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen to test His Prophet. He's chosen His loved one, Yaqub alayhi salatu wassalam, with. حيث قضى بالفراق بينه وبين يوسف, such that Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed that He will separate him from Yusuf for this lengthy period of time. التي يغلب على الظن أنها تبلغ 30 سنة فأكثر. Lengthy period of time that I lean, the Shaykh is saying he leans, that it is approximating 30 years or more. Let's do some math here. According to the math the Shaykh is going to explain. How is it that the Shaykh is saying that potentially between the time that his father last saw him to the time they reunite, there's approximately 30 years. Now, let's begin with the fact that he was taken as a child. We've established this in previous classes. Anyone remember what evidence we shared on why it is assumed that Yusuf was a young child? I mentioned 3 pieces of evidence that prove that Yusuf was a child at the time that he was taken from his father. If any of you remember any of these, do share them with us. So we're going to begin with this assumption that Yusuf was taken as a child. This is number 1. Number 2. أحسنت. أرسله معنا غدا يرتع ويلعب. This is a description of a child. This is one piece of evidence. What else? That his father said, إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَنْ يَأْكُلَهُ الذِّئْبَ. I fear that the wolf will eat him, meaning he's small. Also, what the brothers mentioned in the chat, that they said that they are usba. Usba means that they are a group of men. In other words, he is not yet qualified to be in that group. He's still young. He's before the age of puberty. So this is one thing. The other thing is that in the home of the wife of Al-Aziz, Allah Azza wa Jal said, لَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. Correct. Eaten by the wolf. This is exactly the piece of evidence, another piece of evidence by which we can establish that he was a child at the time. آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. When did we give him hukm, ruling, and ilm, knowledge? لَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ. When he reached the peak of his strength. In other words, he became a man in her home. And it is at that time that she became interested in him in the way that a woman becomes interested in a man. So this is a period of years in which he reached puberty, not only reached puberty, but reached the peak of his strength. Thirdly, Allah said, لَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. After he got imprisoned wrongfully, he remained in the prison. Bid'a is anywhere from 3 to 9. Shaykh al-Sa'di rahimahullah is going to mention in what we are about to read 7 years. 7 years is the number that a large number of the scholars of tafsir said. So add another 7 years to whatever math you already have. And then he came out from the prison to the position that he was in charge of to oversee what they're going to do in the 7 years of plentifulness. Then those years passed. And then the years of drought began. So the years of drought began and things gradually worsened and worsened and worsened until there came a point where his brothers entered upon him and said, what? مَسَّنَا وَأَهْلَنَا الضُّرِّ. We and our family members have all been affected by al-dur. In other words, poverty. The affair had gotten so bad after a prolonged period of drought, so potentially several years of drought, maybe not the full 7, but it was enough for them to make that plea in front of Yusuf in his court. Add these numbers. You can see why the Shaykh is saying potentially 30 years. Imagine that. Allah testing a prophet, not any prophet, Yaqub, the son of Ishaq, the son of Ibrahim, man of the greatest status with Allah Azza wa Jal, with a trial that lasts for 30 years. Who from amongst us is willing to endure patiently to please Allah if Allah wants to test him for a year or 6 months? Some of us, if we get sick for 2 weeks, we start wondering, when is this sickness ever going to leave me? It's for the prophets of Allah Ta'ala. They endure until the last day of their trial. They never give up on patience, nor do they ever give up in thinking good thoughts about Allah, having hope in the relief from Allah, trusting Allah Azza wa Jal will both reward them for their patience and He Jalla wa Ala will uplift and remove the trial, replace it with good. Allah Jalla wa Ala said, Inna ma'al usri yusra. Indeed, with al-usr, with difficulty, there is ease. Inna ma'al usri yusra. Indeed, with that same difficulty, there is another ease. Now let's read what the Shaykh said. May Allah have mercy upon him. He said, من ذلك, from that, إنه بقي مدة في بيت العزيز قبل السجن بالإمكان أن تكون من 7 سنين إلى 10 أو نحو ذلك على وجه الخرص والحزر. Amongst the evidence that he remained a particular period of time in the house of Al-Aziz before he went into prison, perhaps anywhere from 7 years to 10, or the like of that. Shaykh said, however, this is guesswork. This is guesswork. But he used a word that is not zan. He used the word khars, hazr. These two words also indicate guesswork. but they lean more to the side of an educated guess, a guess that is informed. In other words, we have anecdotal evidence showing us that the period of time he spent in the home of Al-Aziz is somewhere in that realm, between 7 to 10 years. He said, ثم مكث بضع سنين في السجن وأكثر أنها 7 سنين, and then he remained بضع سنين in the prison, and the majority are upon the opinion that it is 7 years. ثم بعد خروجه دخلت السبع السنين المخصبات, and then after he left the prison, 7 years of plentifulness began. So now we're talking about 27 years. The Shaykh is doing the math for us. ثم دخلت السبع المجدبات وتردد إخوة يوسف إليه مرات والظاهر أن اللقاء كان في آخرها. And then the 7 years of drought began, and his brothers went and came several times to him. We know from the story at least 3 times. And it appears the meeting between him and his father was in the end of these 7 years. So now we're talking close to 30 years. The Shaykh says, فَهَذِهِ تُقَارِبُ الثَّلَثِينَ وَنَحْوِهَا. Now, listen to this. He said, وَهُوَ فِي هَذِهِ الْمُدَّةِ لَمْ يُفَارِقِ الْحُزْنِ قَلْبَهُ. For the entire duration of that period, sadness did not leave his heart. Why would the Shaykh make such a claim? That Yaqub alayhi salatu wassalam remained sad for that entire period of time. Here are some hints. Show us why. Number 1. When his brothers asked to take Yusuf, go and play with them, to loiter out in the outdoors, he said, إِنِّي لَا يَحْزُنُنِي أَن تَذْهَبُوا بِهِ. Indeed, it saddens me that you take him. Their father is telling them that if he's going to go play with you, and I know you're going to bring him back, I'm going to feel 2 things. Number 1, I'm going to feel sad that he's not by my side. Number 2, وَأَخَافُ أَنْ يَأْكُلَهُ الذِّئْبُ. I'm going to be worried the whole time while he's out playing until you bring him back safe. I'm always going to be thinking the wolf ate him. This is how much his heart is attached to Yusuf. He's saddened by the child going out to play. Some of us today as parents, we may not even understand this. We cannot wait for the moment that the child goes out to play so we can get a break at home and spend some time on our cell phones or tablets. We need a break from the children. For Yaqub, Yusuf going out to play saddens him. Another indication that throughout the story, he continues to make reference to the fact that Yusuf is alive and he needs to be found. They need to search for him. Even all the way to the end of the story, he says, اذهبوا, to his children, فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه. Go and seek information about Yusuf and his brother. He simply did not accept the argument, the story, the lie that Yusuf was eaten. He was upon knowledge from Allah Azza wa Jal. The dream that Yusuf saw, that he interpreted, means without a shadow of a doubt that Yusuf is not only alive, but there will be a time that they will reunite. In other words, he was upon certainty that he will reunite with his son. This, for those of you who know these types of stories where people are separated from one another and they know that they're alive, does not allow for closure. Closure, subhanAllah, is one of the most amazing things in causing healing of the heart and its sadness. When you know that someone's died, and you've buried them with your own hands, for example, you've prayed their janazah, you've put them in the ground, you've thrown dirt into the grave, this brings closure. Then after that, you make dua for them, like you make dua for the dead. You visit their grave occasionally, and so on and so forth. It allows the heart to move on. It allows you to not cling on to the sadness. No matter how dear and how close that person was to you, you eventually move on. But not in the case of Yaqub alayhi salatu wassalam. The pain could simply not die because he knows his child is out there somewhere. He doesn't know what the child is going through. what kind of calamities and trials might be facing him in life. He doesn't know if that child needs support, and he as a father would love to be there to support him, and he cannot do it. He doesn't know what twists and turns in life he has faced with absolutely no one from his family to support him. He has nothing to hope for in the case of that missing child, except for Allah's mercy. Knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal will bestow His mercy upon not just Yusuf, but the entire family of Yaqub, based upon the dream that he had seen. So there is no closure there. The sadness continues. So the Shaykh explains that the sadness did not leave his heart. وَهُوَ دَائِمُ الْبُكَاء, and his crying was constant. Meaning Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam cried all the time about this. And this is proof that there is nothing wrong with crying if it is for the right reason, and that it is not against manliness to cry. Some of the greatest men that have ever walked the face of the earth were described as crying in the Quran. يَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ سُجَّدًا وَيَبْكُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jal said about the people who hear His verses, يَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ يَبْكُونَ وَيَزِيدُهُمْ خُشُوعًا. It increases them in khushu', in humbleness. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was seen crying in many an instance, even crying over the loss of loved ones. Tears would be seen rolling down his face, and he was seen crying in the salah, in the night prayers, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, until he wet his lap with his own tears, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Crying for the right reason is not against manliness. On the contrary, it is a sign of a healthy heart. Men who cannot cry, who do not cry at all, under any circumstances, have an issue, they have a problem. It is not a surplus of manliness. Rather, it is an emotional handicap, because the prophets and the messengers cried for the right reasons. All the way until his eyes turned white from sadness. And he lost his eyesight. And all along, he is patient in the face of Allah's affair. Counting his reward with Allah. He promised from his own self that he's going to be patient. In the statement that he made multiple times in the story, twice in the story, صَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. So beautiful patience. He's promising to be patient in a beautiful manner. وَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَلَا شَكَّ أَنَّهُ وَفَى بِذَلِكَ. And there is no doubt that he fulfilled what he promised, عليه الصلاة والسلام. وَلَا يُنَافِي ذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. And that does not go against the statement where Yaqub said, I surely only complain of my sadness and anxiety to Allah, my anguish to Allah. فَإِنَّ الشَّكْوَى إِلَى اللَّهِ لَا تُنَافِي الصَّبْرِ. For indeed, complaining to Allah is not contrary to patience. وَإِنَّمَا يُنَافِي الصَّبْرِ الشَّكْوَى إِلَى الْمَخْلُوقِ. Let me repeat this. وَإِنَّمَا يُنَافِي الصَّبْرِ الشَّكْوَى إِلَى الْمَخْلُوقِ. And the only thing that goes against patience is to complain to the creation. It is a principle. We should all memorize it. Complaining to the creation contradicts patience. You want to be from the patient. You want to follow in the footsteps of the prophets and the messengers. Then do not complain to the creation. And with this we conclude, inshallah ta'ala. In the next class we begin with the benefit. وَمِنْهَا أَنَّ الْفَرَجَ مَعَ الْكَرْبِ. And the benefit is that relief comes with the trial reaching its zenith. Reaching is its extreme height. Inshallah, we will comment on that in the next class. بإذن الله تعالى. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. أستغفرك ونتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك وأنعم على عبده ونبيه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.